Morning, everybody. The Children's Levy Allocation Committee will now come to order. I'm Portland City Commissioner Dan Saltzman and also the Allocation Chair. And I'd like to welcome you all to today's Portland Children's Levy Allocation Committee. I'd like to introduce my colleagues on the committee who are here with us this morning. On my far right is Alyssa Kinney-Geyer, who is the City of Portland's citizen representative. Next to me, on my right, is Adrienne Livingston, who is Multnomah County appointed citizen representative. On my far left is Ron Beltz. He represents the Portland Business Alliance. And on my immediate left is Multnomah County Commissioner Deborah Kafori. Next, I'd like to introduce the staff of the Portland Children's Levy. Program Director Lisa Pellegrino, who is in charge of the after-school and mentoring investments as well as being Program Director. Communications Director Mary Gay Broderick, and Fiscal Specialist John Kelly. There's John. Before we get started, I'll give a bit of background on the Children's Levy for those who may be watching on TV and are not familiar with it. The Portland Children's Levy was created by voters in 2002 and was overwhelmingly renewed in 2008. The levy annually provides more than $12 million to support organizations reaching 16,000 children and their families per year through programs in early childhood, after school and mentoring, child abuse prevention and intervention, and helping children in foster care succeed. The levy operates with a 5% administrative cap so that 95 cents of every dollar goes directly to proven programs that achieve positive results for children. Since the levy's renewal 3 years ago, the Allocation Committee has invested $36 million in more than 70 programs. We have also widened the scope of our reach through our leverage fund, which matches public dollars with private ones to make sure that resources are available for programs helping the city's most vulnerable residents. Last spring, 9 organizations received $2.5 million in Leverage Fund Challenge grants. These organizations had to secure matching financial support from other community partners on at least a dollar-for-dollar basis in order to be eligible for their money. So back to today's business. We need to begin today's work by approving the minutes of our February 22nd meeting. Everybody's had a chance to...
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the February 22nd meeting, say aye. Aye. Okay. They're unanimous. Next up is the public comment portion of the meeting, where we set aside time for anyone who wishes to speak about topics related to the levy. I believe we have a short presentation today from the Northwest Children's Theater and some Rosemary Anderson High School students. Is that correct? Okay. We'll start with the Children's Theater, or are you all combined? Oh, you're all together. Okay.
Happy family.
Okay, great. Well, if you could just introduce yourselves, and we'll take it from there.
I'm Suzanne Kitchens, and I am the outreach coordinator for the Northwest Children's Theater and School.
I'm Bob Brontz. I'm the after-school director for Rosemary Anderson High School.
And we were lucky enough to get together this year. Northwest Children's Theater has been teaching in Rosemary Anderson High School since, I believe, February. And we started a creative drama after-school program with the kids. And then soon found out how talented they were and that they wanted more, and decided to go for a production, and what better challenge than Shakespeare. So we just performed A Midsummer Night's Dream last Thursday night, and it was a roaring success. Mm-hmm. And because of your help with your sponsorship, we were able to bring the kids over to our venue at the Northwest Children's Theater. They got to use our stage and have real costuming, and we hired lighting and sound designers, and it was a big and very nice production. Mm-hmm. And we will have that on video available for you guys to check that out as well.
I actually come bearing 2 thank yous today. We were the fortunate recipients of one of the challenge grants last year. And because of those dollars, it allowed us to bring music, art, yoga, just all kinds of very cool activities to our students this past year, and it's made a real difference in the school and the culture, so thank you for that. And then this partnership with Suzanne and Northwest Children's Theater. If you asked me a year ago if I would ever see our kids up on stage performing Shakespeare, I would say no way. But there they were last Thursday night, and it was one of the pinnacle moments of my life, just seeing those kids up there performing Shakespeare. So I'm going to let the kids tell you what it meant to them. So thank you for those dollars. Yeah.
Thank you both. Hi, if you could just give us each your name first.
I am Nasia Willingham. I'm a senior at Rosemary Anderson.
I'm Tabby Hopes, and I'm also a senior at Rosemary Anderson.
My name's David Harding. I'm also a senior.
Great.
Yeah.
I played Puck in the play. It was really nice being on stage. It was just, I don't know, it was great.
For me, I was Lysander in Peter Quince. For me, it was really cool. I never have done anything like that before. I didn't think that I would be able to do something like that. I'm kind of stage shy, so all of this is.
You're doing great.
Yeah, I mean, it was just really cool to see all of us, because we're all friends and stuff. We all hang out outside of school to do something like that inside of school. It was just really cool to see that we all had that talent, and it was definitely one of the highlights of my senior year. So thank you, appreciate it.
Yay. I played Hippolyta and Titania, the Fairy Queen, and the experience of putting on this play and being on stage was pretty cool. Like, a lot of my family, like actors and stuff like that, and I was never really into all that until this year, and I think it was a good opportunity for me to experience the stage life and being on stage in front of people.
My favorite part of the play, the production of the play, was that every person that was in the play were typecast, so we were kind of like our character kind of thing. So that was cool. So I hope you guys get to see it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you.
Can you each give us one of your lines?
Oh.
I mean, it was only last Thursday, right?
Give me your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends.
Yay. What was one of my lines?
Do the first one.
First one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What was the first one?
Oh my God.
Oh no, I forgot my lines.
Now, Hippolyta, our nuptial hour draws at near.
Oh yeah, 4 days will quickly steep themselves in night, and 4 nights
Quickly dream away the
will
time.
quickly dream away the time. Sorry.
What's one of my lines?
Yeah, see?
I had to remember the king's line. The course of true love never did run smooth.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent play.
That's right.
Are you performing it again?
No, it's one night only.
We missed
But
it.
We're thinking maybe next year. We did get a standing ovation.
Great. Something to build on. Good.
And next year, we would love to be invited.
Yes.
Yes.
You would have enjoyed it. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
It's very impressive, Northwest Children's Theater and Rosemary Anderson High School. Great, good work.
Get back to school.
So our first agenda item is a presentation on the Cully Concordia Early Childhood Needs Assessment Report by Debbie Bischoff, who is a senior planner at the city's Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I do want to say that several years ago, but it must have been several years ago now, I was most impressed at the Coley Concordia neighborhood plan presentation to City Council, where they actually included an item on early childhood. And I thought that was really, it's probably unlike any other neighborhood plan I've ever seen to actually think about that. So we're here today to hear more about what they've thought about since then. So hand it away to Debbie.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Saltzman. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to brief you on the early childhood needs assessment for Coley Concordia. And I just wanted to introduce a cohort in crime or in activity in Coley Concordia, and that's Ann Rothert, who both works at Child Care Improvement Project, but is also a past chair of the Concordia Neighborhood Association and very active in neighborhood activities in Concordia. She will be assisting me with the presentation. As Commissioner Saltzman said, this needs assessment is an outgrowth of Coley Concordia Community Action Plan that was developed by a wealth of community stakeholders back in 2008 and was approved by City Council that year. And the project looked at the success of families with children in the Coley Concordia area. One of the goal areas, for example, talked about there were 4 goal areas in the action plan, and one talked about schools as centers of community. As I will describe a little bit of this community, you will see that schools do play a very key role in this area because there is a lack of community centers and other places for families to gather in the community. There were 3 action items under that Goal 1 that dealt with child care and early childhood development, specifically looking at the supply, demand, and affordability of child care and early childhood development. There were others on preschool and, again, schools as centers of community providing more services to children and families. So this is a snapshot, the needs assessment, and I think you all have this brochure, which is kind of a quick summary of the needs assessment, what it is, and the findings and recommendations. To our knowledge, it's the first needs assessment of its kind in our county, and we know that it was called for in the county's early childhood policy framework to look geographically at specific areas of our county to assess early childhood needs. And I have to be honest, this is, being a city planner, this is not my bailiwick, and I've learned a lot through this process. And so as we undertook it, I learned more about the framework, and I'm like, oh, we're implementing something out of a framework that I didn't know about. So that was exciting for me. So we're looking at the population 0 to 5 in Coley Concordia. And, you know, when you do a needs assessment, what it is, of course, understanding the landscape of what's out there. How many children are out there? What's the demographics? What are the services out there? What are just the environment with which children 0 to 5 are experiencing out in this area? What are the services being provided? What is not being provided, and what is needed? And so if you turn to page 2 of the brochure, just to understand this community, and the study area came from the Coley Concordia Community Assessment and Action Plan. It is an arbitrary study area, and it runs generally from Northeast 27th to Northeast 82nd, from Northeast Prescott to Northeast Columbia, and it includes most of the Coley neighborhood and most of the Concordia neighborhood, but it's not complete neighborhoods. And we did that because we were looking at 3 public schools, and it is not the full catchment area for these 3 public schools, but it certainly is the bulk of the catchment area for Fabian, Rigler, and Harvey Scott are the 3 public schools that were the basis for the Coley Concordia Community Assessment. For those of you that may not be familiar with Coley and Concordia area, it is one of the most diverse communities, neighborhoods in our city. In fact, I had heard a graduate student presentation last week where I heard that Coley was the most diverse neighborhood in the state of Oregon based on the 2010 population. And so in this study area, 37% of the population is non-white compared to 24% overall in our city. And it continues to diversify in terms of the populations moving in. There is poverty in this area, and that is higher than the city average. But what was really unique that we learned in this study, and it was recently based on the 2010 census data, is that 1 in 3 households in Cully Concordia have children under 18. 1 in 3 households. For the city overall, it's 1 in 10 households. Mm-hmm. So it's an area where we know there are a lot of children. And through my work with again the school communities and the greater community, we know that already. Wrigler and Harvey Scott are both overcrowded. They're adding portables every year. Fabian is at capacity. So we know that there are a lot of children in this community. One of the features of this project was we did focus groups with parents in the community. We held 4 focus groups, one each at these 3 public schools I mentioned, and we did one at Hacienda Community Development Corporation property with the Portland Niños families, which I know that is a program that the Portland Children's Levy funds, so I know saw it in action. It was great. And so we did focus groups with 50 parents overall, and they generally reflected the different demographic makeup of the community. And we did include translation, so we did have Spanish-speaking parents engaged in the focus groups. And what they told us, the key findings are on page 3 of your brochure. They told us that children 0 to 5 need places to socialize, interact, and meet other children. One thing, again, as being a planner in the community, to find out that, yes, we know that there's a lack of sidewalks and streets, especially in Cully. We know that the overall area lacks a community center, and it is a priority to our city parks. It just may take a while to get there. And safe streets. There were things that were lacking that were very important to parents with young children, and parents felt isolated. For example, a parent told us they thought there were children that lived down the street, but they were afraid to walk with their child down the street because of the unsafe conditions. So they don't really know if there are children immediately nearby for their child to connect with. So isolation was a feature, and also reinforcing the fact that with no developed parks and no community center and a lack of family-friendly businesses in the area, Cully in particular, only 2% of the land area is zoned commercial, and there's a real lack of family-friendly businesses in that neighborhood. What neighbors will tell you is there's a lot of alcoholic beverage establishments and some adult uses in the neighborhood, but there's really no place where parents can take their children and feel comfortable and have an experience, and therefore there's no place for different families with children to gather. So the schools, again, it sort of underlies the importance of the schools in these communities. In terms of parents and childcare, many of them do rely on families, friends and neighbors. There are childcare establishments out in the community. It's hard to tell. We did hear from parents that they felt there weren't enough and that there weren't enough affordable childcare out in this community. And for parents, some of whom travel by transit, again, not having businesses in close proximity to them made it difficult. And we did learn from Latino parents that they didn't have as close a network of friends and family in the neighborhood, and that often they ended up providing that child care themselves. So that could mean that they're not going to school or not getting a job because they have to take care of their children. Parents wanted, again, more opportunities to connect with other parents and have children interact. So they were looking for more opportunities to do that. And I think they also felt they didn't know what information was out there. And I think that that's one of the probably easier implementation items is to let them know what services or information is out in the community. Parents felt that preschool was essential, and what we learned again, I mentioned before, in Cully, the two schools, Rigler and Scott, are overcrowded. There's no preschool classes at those schools. Fabian School has a preschool program. It's got a waiting list of 75 children. The Head Starts, Sacagawea Head Start, Albina Head Start, all have waiting lists. So we've learned that there seems to be a great demand and not a need for additional supply of preschool programming out in this area. So that sort of summarizes what we learned from the parents. And then what we learned overall from completing the needs assessment is, again, that quality programming and preschool education is an integral part of preparing children for a successful future, that a lack of community programs, services, and resources make it difficult for parents to transition their children into kindergarten. Programs that do exist, as I said, are at capacity or have waiting lists. The facilities are in need of renovation and expansion in order to address programmatic needs. And I know we were starting to, with the recent Portland Public Schools bond measure, Rigler School was included in the bond, and we were starting discussions about partnerships and maybe the ability to bring an early childhood center to Rigler School that could serve the Cully community. So I think it's still in the minds of the principal and others in the community, and we just have to see what the next steps are with Portland Public Schools facility upgrades. Also, the public and nonprofit schools in the area, are attempting to meet the needs of the diverse populations, and funding physical space, neighborhood infrastructure remains some of the largest barriers to providing those services. And again, the lack of family support services, community gathering spaces like a community center, and parenting network opportunities makes it more difficult for, again, parents to and families to have that interaction and the child-to-child interaction that's so important for those young children. So those are some of the key findings. I'm going to turn it over to Anne to talk about the recommendations, and I can conclude with next steps after that.
Okay. First, I just want to say it's been really great to be able to combine my community life and my work life and see some real results in both, and it's been a lot of great work. On the last page is a summary of the next steps and recommendations, and the Multnomah County Early Childhood Council, their childhood committee has been really supportive and helpful through this process, both in working through questions for the focus groups, et cetera. But one of the things we know we need to do is expand the availability, eligibility, capacity, and affordability of preschool and child care programs. We had one parent in particular who his income is just above the line, so he's not eligible for Head Start, but his income isn't high enough to meet the fees of some of the preschools in the area. So there's that middle ground that is hard. To identify and create indications to evaluate future progress. The City of Portland completed the Cully Main Street project to provide a framework for the establishment of family-friendly businesses and early childhood facilities and incorporate economic development assistance in bringing about these businesses. And these recommendations are sort of general. We have a list of more specific things, but one thing we know is the county's committee is willing to support and create an ad hoc committee to look at specifically these issues to see how the next steps can be achieved. Another idea that we had was to create a caring community council with a coordinator to work with service providers and connect the families, and that's in all my work, both professionally and in the community. I've really seen the difference it makes if there is a coordinator, a staffed coordinator that can keep things rolling. Lots of times I've been in projects where the staff person went away, and with all good intentions, we thought people would stay involved, and it's just too challenging and doesn't seem to pan out. We need to further research the need and establish to find out if it would make sense to establish a relief nursery in the Cully neighborhood. and to encourage and organize community members to create a swap and play facility for families with young children. One of the other specifics, we know that a lot of informal child care is going on in the community and family, friends, and neighbors, and I know most of you are familiar with the work of Child Care Improvement Project. One of the specific recommendations was to create a Spanish-speaking network, and my colleague Rosie Gomez, off the top of her head, said she knows of 7 providers that would be interested, and with some outreach, I know we would have a full network of 15, and that would really, it's also an economic development issue too, because if you have child care providers who are increasing their capacity, which serves the needs of the community, but it also increases the income of the community. We have really strong partners that have been at the table through this whole process, and that makes all of this so doable. I have to say, too, I've been involved in lots of these processes through all my years, and this has been by far one of the most satisfying things to see things actually accomplished, and to see child care improved in my community would be great. But I know Concordia University is a really strong partner. They have been looking at early childhood development center or a child care in some form. Hacienda has a lot of support, and both the neighborhood coalitions are both really supportive of all of this also.
I would just like to add on the next steps. We're in the process of doing briefings like we are today. I've been briefing with some city commissioners. The mayor has already been briefed, and we plan on also briefing some county commissioners. And I know that, for example, Loretta Smith is now the commissioner over the Cully-Concordia area, so we want to brief her, and Chair Kogan was briefed on this previously, so we'll get up to briefing him again too. And the mayor had asked we present this to the Cradle to Career Initiative and to some other entities. So we're in the briefing process, and again, this will go back to the Early Childhood Council to actually take that step in organizing that ad hoc committee. And for myself as a city planner, I have begun a Cully Main Street project, and again, hoping that if we can increase the commercial zoning in the heart of Cully, and we could possibly get some, for example, Portland Development Commission technical assistance to work with Hacienda, CDC, Micro Mercantes program, or other interested residents in Cully who want to start a business and try to locate it in Cully where the needs are, then that would be a great way to follow up on that one area that we can. And I'll continue to work with staff at Parks and Rec and other bureaus to try to bring about more programming for children and youth. I know there were concerns about with Head Start closing for summer, and SUN programs are limited, but I would like to say that SUN has been a very important service provider in Cully-Concordia area at these schools that, they're trying to step up and even provide a little more programming for children and young children and parents, and again, as a way to bring them together and bring that socialization together. But there's a lot of issues out here, and especially when summer comes, there's a lot of children and they don't have any place to go. So we'll continue to work on the issues out here. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing about because I would be remiss if I didn't mention the work that the Child Care Resource and Referral of Multnomah County has done with us. Jean Lemieux has given us tons of information, and one of the outcomes has been that she is looking at bringing some of her services of training out to the community instead of holding the trainings only at the center. So I just wanted to mention her and that.
Well, thank you, Debbie and Ann, for a wonderful piece of work here. Are there questions?
I just have a comment. It's a really heartwarming report. It's, you exemplify, I think, what the Portland Children's Levy tries to do. You're representing the city. I know, Ann, you've been on the Commission on Children, Early Childhood Council, and Child Care and Education Committee for years. I served with you on that. I didn't know your Cully-Concordia place-based, hat as well. But the Multnomah County Commission on Children, under Josh's leadership, providing that framework, and then the Children's Levy being able to partner the city and the county and nonprofits together, partnering. A lot of the groups that you mentioned are Portland Children Levy grantees, the Child Care Resource and Referral, which we'll hear more about later, Hacienda, Latina Network, the Sun School programs at some of the schools in your neighborhood. Right across the border, NEA is now starting, as another grantee, is starting to look at early childhood programs, which they haven't done to date. I know Hacienda is looking a lot at the adult businesses across the street from one of their housing projects and trying to do some economic development there. Verde is not one that we fund, but there's a lot of exciting things going on, and I'm really proud that the Children's Levy can be a partner to many of the groups, not all, but it's really exciting.
I should just say that Meg McElroy has been an invaluable staff person in this project too.
Yeah.
So,
I was just wondering if you could just explain a little bit. It seemed like this area was just a no-growth area. It was losing population. Like, isn't the Kennedy School roughly in close to it, the old Adams High School?
right. So
yeah. When did the growth start happening? Population, and then what's that going to mean for the high school? Is it mostly Madison, or how will this population get split up for high school kids?
Okay. So there's a lot of 42nd Avenue is the key street here. So that divides Concordia and Cully. Children on the west side of 42nd go to Jefferson High School, and students on the east side of 42nd go to Madison High School. And most of the growth, Concordia is pretty well developed, and there's not a lot of infill development happening there. Its growth is marginal, but there's growth. But Cully is the neighborhood that is much larger, has larger lots, has a lot of room for infill development. And over time, it has been growing in population. And for example, along Northeast Killingsworth Street is a lot of apartment buildings with a lot of families with children. So that is the neighborhood that really is experiencing the population growth. And I think Portland Public Schools is trying to plan for the future. And, again, the Portland Public Schools bond measure that failed with Rigler School was a way to try to address the overcrowding situation, along with the physical conditions that exist at that school. So it is an area, and it seems like the number of families with children and the number of children in the neighborhood, if we look at trends, is going to continue to stay and grow a little bit over time, whereas other neighborhoods, in fact, are decreasing with the number of children.
I was just curious to ask. So I know it was 2008 when I first heard of your efforts, and how long did it actually take you to come up with this nice report here?
We started the needs assessment in the fall of last year.
Okay.
And we do have a larger document, the needs assessment report itself, that we're just doing final formatting, and it'll be something that it is a snapshot in time, and if implementation continues, it may need to be updated over time, but it's a good resource of information for what we have learned, and can serve that ad hoc committee, hopefully.
So I guess my sort of where I was going to next was, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had such an early child needs assessment for all areas of the city, at least where there are substantial numbers of children?
Yeah, it seems like this work that we've done serves as a really good model to use in other areas.
Right. And I am aware that the Children's Institute is just about to begin a needs assessment out in the David Douglas. I think it's the Old Boyles School. And I do know that our Southeast District liaison would like to do work down in the Brentwood-Darlington area, and that Portland Public Schools, their early childhood staff that we've worked with, would be very interested in seeing a similar type of needs assessment happen out in that part of Southeast Portland.
Well, good. I will certainly maybe talk to you later about how we can maybe make this actually occur in other neighborhoods as well.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for your great work.
Thank you.
So next up is our Josh Harwood, the city's economist, city's brand new economist, about a year now. And he will present revenue projections for the children's levy for the remaining years of the current levy period. Staff will join him in the discussion and talk about how these projections will affect us as we move forward in the next few years. So, Lisa, were you? Yeah.
Whatever you guys want to do.
Oh, yeah, we got John.
I'll let Josh talk first. Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you, committee. Again, my name is Josh Howard. I'm the City of Portland city economist. My office is responsible for providing the property tax forecasts that fund the children's levy. I've worked with John and Lisa, both asked me to come here to talk a little bit about some of the changes that have occurred just in the 9 months or so that I've been on board. That are not necessarily indicative of me, but
don't kill the messenger.
We won't hold this against you. No.
Just the system and how it works, and talk about property tax compression a little bit. 5 or 10 minutes on property tax compression is a little bit like 5 or 10 minutes on the federal health care debate. It is sort of one of these nuances of state property tax law that's a little bit difficult. As a result, I've kind of provided sort of an ad hoc handout for you. I apologize for its informality. I was out all of last week, but I think it'll help sort of guide step by step how we look at these sorts of things and how we try to integrate them into our forecasts.
I think I have. Do you have copies of those?
Yeah, I gave you one.
Okay.
The FAQs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
He has them.
Thanks.
Hopefully in your packets.
It just starts with
Great.
with just sort of questions that we often get about property tax compression and sort of how it relates, and then it deals a little bit more specifically with the children's levy, as it is Portland's local option levy. Thank you. It also has sort of an example of the differences between local option levy compression and permanent levy compression. These are general fund levies at both the city and county. Those are much more stable and aren't as impacted as much. And then finally on the back, there's a table sort of giving examples of how compression works on a property-by-property basis. And that's an important component to this. Property tax compression, reduces taxes owed on an individual property-by-property basis based on a limit that's set in state law. Measures 5 and 50, passed in the 90s, both sought to limit property tax collections. One way that it did so was it limited general non-school, non-debt property tax collections on any individual property to $10 per $1,000 of real market value. So there's two values at play here. There's a real market value. This is the value you think of when you think of the value of your home, your commercial property, all those sorts of things. But then there's also a taxable value, and that's the value by which the tax is assessed. This assessed value, that we call it, was based essentially in 1995 levels and allowed to increase 3% per year each year thereafter. As we know, over about the decade between 1995, 6, 7 and 2005, 6, 7, property values increased at a much more dramatic rate. So the real market values grew much faster than our taxable values did. What it did essentially is create, based on the existing levies, a tax cut for all of those properties that grew faster than that. And as property values have come down, the assessed values have kept going up by 3% until it reaches that the same as the real market value. So what the cap did, the $10 per $1,000 of real market value, was for those properties whose assessed value, the taxable value, times the tax rate, would yield an amount higher than that limit. The way to mitigate that was to first decrease all local option levies on that property proportionally. So if there's more than one, most people in the city of Portland at least have the children's levy and the library local option levy. So those would get reduced first, all the way to zero if need be. If you reduce them both to zero, or all your local option levies to zero, and you were still above that $10 per $1,000 of real market value cap, then all permanent levies, so the Multnomah County General Fund levy, City of Portland General Fund levy, would all be reduced proportionally until you get to that cap. So as you can see by that one simple example, the children's levy and the library levy in this case, both get hit much harder than sort of the general fund levies. They also are subject to much greater volatility. So as real market values come down, the amount of tax that is subject to that limit also comes down. And more properties are getting caught up in that compression calculation, particularly in Southeast Portland, far Southeast Portland. But and so over time, that's the big concern that we're dealing with right now. This is the first time since those measures were in place that we've had to deal with real market value declines. And that's posed a little bit of a problem in sort of both discussing how it would impact, but more importantly, what the magnitude of the impact is.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Because I got confused with the very last part of what you said.
No problem.
So as the real market values started to decline and the assessed started to go up, I get how at some point they meet each other. But that hasn't happened yet?
No, generally it hasn't. In fact, most places in Portland, if we think of residential property, in some properties it has. Industrial property, for instance, is much closer to that one-for-one. But residential property is closer to about 6% assessed value to real market value.
So I got lost in the very last piece about the very last part about where the compression happened.
The compression happens, the compression is based on real market values.
Right.
So that's where the cap is based on. Right. So as real market values decline, that cap also declines. And that limits further and further, it cuts in further and further to the existing levies on those properties.
Okay, so we're getting cut because of the real market value drop, not because of assessed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Although the assessed value is driving some of that because that's actually increasing, which is increasing the tax liability.
Can I ask a quick question since we're on the confused level?
No, that's fine. This is
does bond levies play in this, or is that excluded?
They're excluded.
They're excluded. Okay.
Yes, these are non-debt, non-school levies. There's a separate cap for schools levies too, but trying to narrow the scope of this discussion if we can, take it as understandable as possible, recognizing it's pretty difficult. So what's happened? If you look at maybe a good example is if you look at the graph on the second page of your handout. You can see this is an example from Multnomah County, and the bottom line on that chart is the general fund compression. And you can see it's relatively stable. It has gone up a little bit as real market values have declined, but not a lot. Whereas you can see as real market values increased, if you look at the library local option compression, as market values increased, compression went down because that increased the cap that was available for each property. Then, as market values started to decline, you can see compression is increasing, and it's increasing. Expected to increase again. You can almost expect a perfect U shape there, beginning in 11-12. And in compiling this forecast that you're dealing with now, it was a pretty collaborative effort between myself, the Tax Supervising Conservation Commission, and Multnomah County. We all talked about sort of how it relates to local option levies. Because it is so difficult, we at least wanted to be on the same page as to what we would expect. And we are generally. In fact, the amount of compression that I'm expecting for children's option levy is a little bit higher than the Tax Supervising Commission came up with. But we're all within the same range, and it is very volatile. So what that ends up doing is pushing down the available actual collectible property taxes for the children's levy. And as we move forward, we expect that we will see increased compression even further in 12-13, and in 13-14 we expect it to sort of even out a little bit. But you're subject to pretty significant volatility. There are still risks at play, not the least of which is the fact that this is really the first time we're experiencing it. So we're doing the best we can to model on a property-by-property basis and really kind of drill down and try to get a basis for it. But when we're talking about real market declines, we know broadly what that means, but because it's on an individual property-by-property basis, it's much more difficult to sort of estimate total compression on the aggregate level. There's a couple other things at play that I think are important, and one of which that we've talked about internally and externally, I know at the county, is the possibility of a permanent district for the library, Multnomah County Library, and that would impact children's levy collections, again, by up to about $1 million less still in 12-13 than we have currently in the forecast. We're still working out some of the details of that. It's a relatively new development, at least to get to a forecasting perspective. But that is a risk that's at play. Also, we have seen further declines in residential value in the beginning part of this year, in the last 6 months. And personally, I'm not terribly optimistic that we'll see that turn around anytime real soon. And so there are some risks at play. That having been said, we are expecting compression to increase by about the same amount as it did last year, this next year. I don't know if I want to drill any deeper into that. Go ahead.
13.
So I'm looking at your chart, and it says in 10-11, this is library district, I'm sorry, but it's compression of about...
Their compression is a little bit lower than yours.
22% compression.
Yeah, they're about 22. We're the children's levy is about 27% for the current year.
And your last statement was you expect...
We expect it to jump. It went from about 19 or about 20 to 27%. We're expecting to go from 27% to 33, and then to 36% over the next couple of years. So it essentially means that over the next 3 years, your revenues are basically flat because you have some increases in assessed value as we continue to creep up closer to real market values, but your revenues stay relatively flat.
Excuse me, you gave us those compression percentages in January, right?
Yes.
So we're going to talk next about what that means in real dollars to the levy. Josh has given us the big picture.
Okay.
I wanted him here to try to talk about the complicated stuff.
No, I appreciate that.
I wasn't going to try to answer questions about compression.
So any questions of Josh before we move on to Lisa and John talking about the practical implications of all this for the children's levy? I guess I just have one question. So we hear a lot about real market values declining nationwide here in Portland. Is that the rule then? I mean, is it almost automatic that all real market values are declining, or is it?
Well, Commissioner, I think, we kind of like to say real estate is like politics, everything's local. Yeah. I think that there will be areas that will do better than others, and that's actually complicates this analysis. If we could say simply that every individual property dropped by 7%, it would be much easier than if we say these are dropping by 12, but these are staying flat, and these are dropping by 3. It makes it much more difficult. But I do think, broadly speaking, we are going to see declines. We have seen declines since January, and we will continue, although be at probably lower levels, but we're not going to see increases probably in the next several years. And I think increases really provide a little bit of a buffer, and really sort of, if we can see property increases, value increases, that increases that limit and allows for less compression. And I don't expect to see that, at least through the life of the existing levy.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Just about housing stock. I mean, the hope was also that as we add more properties to our taxable base, that would help us increase our resources. I'm assuming that this is a net that's taking anything that's new coming onto the market into account, and so the compression that you've listed here, the loss due to that, is the net of gaining new property values and yet the lower value.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right. And I think that there will be some gains of stuff coming on the property tax rolls, but that will only serve to slightly mitigate what are otherwise declining values.
I've got another question. So there was, in the 2 zip codes that our family lives in roughly, or there was a report that it was either March or April, there was 86 home sales. 38 of them were foreclosed. So my thought process is most of those people probably are going to go appeal their taxes this fall. So are you taking into consideration the potential of a huge amount of decreased value with all the foreclosure sales that are taking place and all these potential appeals that are going to be coming this fall?
It is implied in the forecast. The way we do it is we look at you have discounts, delinquencies, and variances essentially, and those have been increased in the forecast, both from last year, this year, next year, and so forth, to try to account for some of that. And in the aggregate, that's very hard to sort of stick a number on, just because it depends on people's inclination to do those sorts of things. But what you did speak about, the fact that almost half are foreclosures, I think does speak to the weakness in the market, and that there has been some discussion about a shadow inventory of banks sitting on foreclosed properties, not actually even putting them on the market. letting people live in them a lot longer because of foreclosure law, moratoriums, and all these other things, that it's just going to be a drag over the long term. We're not having sort of a sharp correction that maybe we need and then rebalance. We're just slowly kind of teeing down at it.
Questions for Josh? Okay, well, thank you very much. And we'll now take John and Lisa to
So Mary Gay, can you give us the...
translate into how this affects the children's
So
effort.
you all have a piece of paper, and it was available for folks. Yours doesn't have the logo, but it just, we've got a couple sets of numbers to talk about.
I don't think we have that.
It's not in your pocket?
Okay, well, it should be on your screen right now. So the top numbers are the revenue projections. So that you can see the years fiscal year 09 through fiscal year 14. So that's the whole 5 years of the levy. Originally, shortly after the levy got passed, the city economist, who was not Josh, gave us a number, and it was right up over $70 million. So then we made 3-year grants, and we set aside the leverage fund. We also had some money left over from the prior levy. And so that was the number we thought we were going to have for 5 years, $70 million. Then this year, in January, Josh gave us a new number, which is $63 million, a little over $63 million. So the change is 6.6. So we have $6.6 million less than we thought we were going to have. Those old projections were really accurate. For the first 2 years, we came in just accurate in the way I, an accountant, like to be accurate. They were conservative. We came in slightly over, just 1% or 2% over. I think last year was 4%.
When you say old projections, which ones?
The original, the top number, $70 million.
$70 million. Okay.
But of course, we only collected 2 years of that, and then the whole thing changed. So I took the old actuals and then the new projections, including the year we're in, which is fiscal year 11, and then so this is the second year of the levy. It gets confusing. So we've committed funds through next year, right? We did 3-year grants, year 1, 2, and 3 of the new levy. Exactly, through fiscal year 12. I want to say that Josh's numbers for this year, which is the first year we got projections from Josh, are right on. We're looking like we're going to, again, hit it plus or minus $100,000. I actually think we'll have slightly more revenue, just 1% or 2%, which is great.
But keeping in mind those projections were lowered, so we have less revenue than we anticipated having this year.
So we're looking, that's $63 million number, $63.4 million. That's what we're expecting to have.
Over the life of the current
Over
levy.
the 5 years.
5 years. Of
yes.
the current levy.
So that's $6.6 million fewer dollars than we thought we were going to have. So now we'll go to the lower part of the set of numbers. The $22 million, that top number is now we're only looking at the last 2 years of the levy. We're in year 2. We've committed money through this year and through next year with our non-leverage, what do we call them, the challenge grants? No,
just
our
the
regular
competitive
grants.
The bulk of the grants we give.
Yeah.
Okay? The regular competitive process.
So we have $22 million available for the years 4 and 5 of the current levy. So we haven't committed any funds for that time yet. If we wanted to so now we're going to look at that $25.8 million number. If we wanted to renew the non-leverage fund grants, the regular competitive grants at their fiscal year 12 levels, so the dollar amounts they'll each get next year, we would need $25.8 million. So that's setting aside the leverage. The leverage fund is its own thing. We committed a certain amount of money, and there's money there to fund all of that as we committed it. Basically, that 25.8 is what, to just keep everybody at the same level we would need, but we only have 22.3. So this is my 5th year here. This is the first time I've had to bring you bad news. Mm-hmm. We need $3.5 million more dollars just to stay steady, no COLAs.
No COLAs.
And we have, so that's no COLAs. So that would be 13.7% of the $25 million.
So can I ask a question as somebody who's come on somewhat recently, still learning? In the first, this is the second time you've had the 5-year levy, correct? So the first go around, you had this, was it the same situation where you had a 3-year competitive grants, and then the final 2 years
It was really different because
Okay.
for a variety of reasons. So we did the grants were not all done at once; they were rolled out over time because there was only one staff person starting. So, and also the levy ended up really functioning for 6 years because of that late startup. It didn't spend its revenues that first year, and so it had excess revenues and ran for another year. So it was a longer period of time. The contracts were done for different amounts of times. So it really was quite different. It wasn't.
So what was the originally when we started this in 2009? Was it projected that to do with 3-year grants? Then the final 2 years would be. Were you projecting that you were just going to give, or would people have to re-up, come back with their?
Last time we did a renewal process, so there will be, and I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
In a minute, but yes, there's we do a renewal process of some kind, and I'll explain a little bit about what that involves. So yes, we made the decision at this group level to do 3-year grants with an option to renew. No guarantee. People know that.
Okay.
No guarantee that you'll get renewed, and no guarantee the same money will be there for you to get renewed. So there's not a promise or.
Okay, that's what I was wondering if there was some historical. If people thought that there was an implied commitment to continuing the grants or not. But
It was just no. I mean, in the contract or in the RFP, it said an option to apply for renewal.
Okay.
So that's what the promise is. I guess is an option to apply.
Let me explain one other difference. We have $6.6 million fewer dollars than we thought we would have, but we're only $3.5 million short. That's because there was about $3 million that was uncommitted. We were, it was a great problem to have. Oh, what are we going to do with the extra $3 million? Well, that problem has gone away, and so that's
So
what
that
we thought we were going to
$3
have.
million that was uncommitted has been applied towards the $6 million decrease
Yes,
in revenue to
essentially.
give us the current 3.5 that we have to
Yes.
Right.
reduce.
We thought we were going to have lots of extra money to grant out, which was
Yeah.
fun
Well,
and exciting.
we never know, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
we thought, that we.
You left it as
we
a
always
buffer.
Had, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we
you
always
left
buffer, and then, okay, if there's more money. And then also there was the child care initiative, which I'll speak about.
Oh, that's the other important thing to
Yes,
know.
right.
The child care initiative in the 25.8 is not in there. So that is that because that was a separate. So all I'm talking about, the 25.8 is just the competitive grants, the regular grants.
All the ones that this group decided on.
Right.
in
So if
our
we
last
wanted to
funding
continue the child care initiative that ends in June of 12, we would have to further cut back. Right?
Exactly.
Right.
And
And they will have gone through their 2.7 million.
I'll
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you just hold off a little bit, I'll
Yeah,
talk a
sure.
little bit more
But
about
yes.
that.
That's
I
our,
wanted
that's
to
our
keep
next
it
agenda
extra.
item. So-
Right.
So I just want to make sure that folks understand
Another
this
question.
aspect.
So how much is in our leveraged fund that's not committed?
The leverage fund, so all the challenge grants have been contracted for with the exception of one right now, which they're still having their time to finish raising their money, and they're going to find a site, an actual physical site to site their program at for the expansion. So that one's still open, and the contract has not been finished for that. On the collaboration grant side, if you remember last time we were here together, we advised when we saw revenue projections coming in lower, the collaboration committee was just allocating $500,000, so a pretty small amount of the total pie. We stopped them making their advice and entertaining more proposals at 350, if I'm not mistaken. So there was $150,000 that was unallocated, and at this point we would advise you not allocate it. You guys made decisions and tentative decisions about the 350 last time around, and again we'll speak about those at the end of the meeting a little further. But and most of those are now finished up. The collaboration grants that we did are mostly the contracts have been written and are finished with one exception. So it's a very, I mean, in terms of dealing with our issues here, a pretty small amount and that's taken into account already. So that those unallocated funds are taken into account. In that 3.5 deficit, we included any monies that we would have left over from that.
And then leverage fund grants are all obligated?
Yeah. The challenge grants are all written with the exception of one, and the collaboration grants are all written with the exception of one.
Other questions? So definitely, I think maybe if you could toggle back to us now. This certainly presents us with some challenging decisions that we're going to have to make as we go into the contract renewal period. As you can see from the handout, if we were to just do a straight across the board cut, it would be roughly 14% to every program that we invest in. which is, a substantial cut. But we do have other approaches, and that's kind of why we're here. The five of us is to, consider other things. And I know that the staff will be bringing to us in a timely manner their recommendations and how we might also approach this. Certainly, it may make more sense to defund a program than to cut all 14%. But that's information I'm only saying in the abstract and don't have any certainly reason to state that factually. But it's.
At this point, it's kind of too early to tell. I don't even think the staff would be able to give you even a preliminary course of action. And there's not a rush in that sense because we'll be doing this next spring. But we wanted to make sure that grantees were on notice and that you all had an understanding of where we were heading once receiving these forecasts and once getting a chance to see the forecast for this year play out, so we could have some reasonable confidence that these were likely, good numbers to rely on. What we anticipate doing, so we would be normally going through a renewal process. We'll be bringing you a bunch of data on each grantee, essentially, when it comes time for a renewal decision. So you'll have all the data on contract performance. You'll have all the data that we're gathering, that we kind of present to you at that end of the year presentation around participation and programs, et cetera, outcomes, all the stuff all the information we collect about each program. We do site visits, and those site visits will be happening beginning in the fall. So you'll have the information that we gather from the site visit. And then, it's difficult to make, there's sort of per program types of recommendations you can imagine. Then there's also, you're dealing with a set of programs, right? And, how do you want to arrange the money given the set rather than, okay, this program either did well or didn't do well, or we like it or we don't like it. So it's going to be a complex puzzle, I think, to work out in some respects. It's not so simple as just looking at a set of data and then therefore making decisions. So I think staff will be trying to give you some options of ways you could look at it when it comes time to make the decisions. Across the board cuts, here's what that looks like. Here's what it looks like if here's programs, issues or problems, or here's programs, whatever, that haven't performed as we expected, or everybody's performed as we expected, and we don't make any individual recommendations on that basis. There's money between the different funding areas as well. Do you want to keep it constant? Do you not? So there's these kinds of questions that we're going to have to face. It's going to be a more, I guess, what I really want to put you on notice of, is going to be a more complicated renewal context than just what we'd have. For those of you who have been here for, I guess really it's only Dan and Ron who've been here long enough to have gone through the previous renewal. It won't be quite as simple as that. So that's sort of really what we wanted to communicate today, so you're all prepared for it. And then by the fall meeting, we should have a bit more information for you.
I was going to say the other thing that we should probably make sure that you're keeping us informed of with this decreased revenue to make sure we're 5% or under on the administration cap.
Yeah, we always watch that.
We've got to plan ahead with that much decrease.
We already have adjusted our budget.
Can I ask another question from Commissioner Kafori's question? Last time around, when you did go through a renewal and it was at staggered, did you invite any other new groups in? Did you open it up, or did we only do that when the levy passed again? Okay.
Levy passed again.
And you're thinking that we would probably do the same thing?
Given the cut scenario that we're facing, I wouldn't recommend opening it up now. And to be honest, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that anyway, for a variety of reasons. But it's in the process and the time that it takes is extensive.
And the decisions have to be made by next spring?
Yes, because contracts expire in July or June 30 of 12. So you want to be able to have, you don't want, there's staffing issues. There's a lot of issues there that people need to know what's going to happen so they can plan ahead.
Okay.
So when would we start, or how soon can we start seeing the information you're gathering on our individual grants?
Ideally, probably not till after the 1st of next year, because that's when we're going to get. So we'll collect a bunch of annual information on all contracts at the end of July this year, and then usually we come up with we sort of crunch all our data and can give it back to you by our December meeting. So we'll have the annual data kind of crunched and ready to look at, but we'll have another set of 6-month data that we get at the end of January. So we would probably want to amalgamate all the data we have into one picture for each, so you have sort of individual grant information, as well as then work up some scenarios for how you might approach the whole pie, which is a different situation than just simply looking at each grant, right? So that's when I think realistically it's going to be, if you want to make use of all the information that we would have available to make those decisions, that's when it's going to be. My guess is February, March of next year. So a ways away. For the specifics, but we'll come to you in the fall with kind of what the process would look like and understanding when we can tell you what information we have. We would want to know if there's other information you would need or want, so we have time to put that together. So that would be kind of where we'd be headed for the fall meeting, is to be thinking about that. So we'll kind of pose those questions to you and be asking for your input.
I have a question. Josh, you talked about the county potentially having the library special district that we are going to be voting on probably at the end of this month. Do these figures take into consideration that could occur, and by putting the library into a different position in the compression, how it might affect the children's levy?
It takes into account, or it assumes, a renewal of a slightly higher level of the existing local option levy. So to the extent that either the existing levy is renewed at a higher level, or if it's a permanent district, becomes a permanent district, those impacts could be up to an additional $1 million decline in children's levy revenue.
So beyond
Yes.
figures here, we could be looking at additional million.
Yeah, and that would start in fiscal year 12-13. So it'd be for the last 2 years of the existing levy.
So in addition to the $3.5 million we're looking at reducing, there could be an additional
$1 million per year.
for that.
Yeah, I mean, we're just, I should say too, we're just not just starting, but we're getting into the details about this. And I've been working with Mike Jaspin at the county, and we're trying to figure out the best way to do it. There's a bunch of feedback loops that happen if you're trying to model it going forward because of bond levies that fluctuate, and because we have FPD&R, the fire police disabilities. It gets pretty down into the minutia. So we're working on that now, trying to come to some level of ranges of impacts and those kinds of things. And speaking to what Lisa was just mentioning too, we'll have another forecast for you following that election in November. Basically, we'll have one probably in December of this year that will take into account whatever's happened in addition to any other new information that we have.
So that number's high, because when I was at the county hearing where Jaspin was reporting on what the difference would be, he was estimating more like $200,000 to $300,000 worth of difference between renewing library local option at higher level, and or at the level that they would need to renew it at in order to secure the revenue base that they need to run their libraries, versus permanent district. He was talking $200,000 to $300,000 worth of difference a year, not $1 million. So that's changed.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think when we talked about this before, we were talking about renewing it at a lower level. It's higher than the existing level, but lower than what he was presenting more recently. And so we've got he's talking about Mike in talking with him. They're talking about increasing the existing local option levy at a much higher rate than the forecast numbers.
I asked him. I mean, I specifically asked him that. I said, assuming that you renewed at the local option rate you would need in order to make up what you need, and then compare that to what the permanent
right,
district.
And that's
compare
true.
those two numbers, because that's the only relevant comparison as far as I can understand.
Right, but what you need is different from what you have right now.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
He had modeled what he had, but I asked him specifically, so what you need, compare those two for me, and he estimated a difference.
Yeah, I think the difference is about 700,000 versus 900,000 or $1 million.
Okay, so it's higher. Yeah, you're right.
And Commissioner Kafori, so the county will be voting on that this week, you said? Or
I'm voting on whether or not to send it to the citizens. The citizens ultimately will vote. Multnomah County will vote on.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
So
but we have to refer it, correct.
Right, and that's the district you're looking at.
Right. And I can't say that for sure the vote has not been scheduled, but I know we have a public hearing scheduled by the end of the month. So I don't know what the date is that we're going to be voting.
Okay.
Although, wait, so I'm thinking that what you just said, so renewing at the old level, around $700,000 worth of difference, renewing at permanent district level, it may not be as big a gap. All right, we'll have to talk more.
Yeah,
about
I can talk to you. I can work
Okay,
it
all
out.
right.
Okay, yeah, let's try to
That's
get
a key issue.
our numbers straight, since we may want to testify at the county's hearing on this matter.
Possibly.
Yeah, possibly. But okay, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Josh. Appreciate it. Thanks, John. Lisa's going to stay up here for our next item, which is a staff update, and this is on the Child Care Initiative. As a refresher, the Allocation Committee voted in 2007 to support the Child Care Initiative, which not only provides support to child care centers to improve their quality, but also offers financial support to low-income working families for child care. So, Lisa?
So I'm here in Meg's stead to give you, I guess she's home doing her own set of childcare today, an update on this initiative, although she's the one who really has been the primary person working on it. So to refresh people who were not here at the time, so this is really Deborah and Adrian who were not around when this was made. So contrary to the situation that we just experienced, there was a time when the levy had excess revenues. And so during the first 3 years of the original levy, there were more revenues generated, or revenues began to pile up that had not been allocated because, again, we were given fairly conservative projections on what revenues would be, and we allocated based on those projections, not based in, and then if actuals come in higher, you accumulate a surplus. So when that surplus accumulated, we came to the committee with some ideas about how that might be spent. And what the committee wanted to do was to form a group to consider what might be done in the child care arena. So they did that, and Alyssa served on that group, along with a former committee member named Dave Willis, who was on the allocation committee. And they worked with the group to come up with an idea to improve quality and improve affordability for families, working families who needed childcare. So that was sort of the birth of this initiative, and the original pot of funds to fund was around $2.7 million. And the original concept, I think, was a 3-year contract. Because of startup took quite a while to figure out how to flow these funds and get it kind of up and rolling, and you have to do marketing and outreach and make sure people understand what it is and get folks to enroll in it, and that all took time. So the original contract got extended in order to be able to use the funds for the purpose that they were allotted for, so that it is now this contract is going to end at the same time that all the competitive contracts end, which is June 30 next year, June 30 of 12. So I'll give you a little bit of update on the substance so you can kind of understand what was happening for the last year, especially for folks who really were not here when this was done or when this was discussed, because it's been humming along. We haven't really come to you with much of an update since then. So as Dan said, the services were divided into two sort of sectors. There's a quality and part of the initiative, which was meant to improve the quality of childcare centers that had scored sort of below a threshold on the quality indicators. So the quality indicators is a state level kind of thing that sort of a form that centers fill out about themselves. It's not an independent observation of the center or quality assessment of the center.
Actually, the childcare licensing people actually have to fill that out. They have to monitor it or verify it. They fill it out, but they have licensing people who come and make sure it's like it's ratio, group size, compensation level, how long people have been there, things like that, hard and fast numbers. Mm-hmm. And so the licensing people actually do verify.
Okay. So any people that fall below a threshold on that quality indicators would be eligible for the quality services. Okay, so they can sign up, and there's a whole sort of range of services that folks can get with that, including professional development, training, materials, educational materials, a curriculum, physical improvements to the space to improve either safety or sort of the enrichment of the options in the space, and then consultants that help with early childhood mental health or just basic child development training or other types of services that or knowledge that people need to get. So that was one sector of the initiative really aimed specifically at child care centers. The other sector was aimed at affordability, which was the group that worked in this came up with the parameters to figure out how to best provide subsidies for childcare, essentially. And the system that they worked out over time was to basically target affordability services so that working families would not pay more than 15% of their income toward childcare expenses. The eligibility for the program in order to be allowed to apply for the subsidy, you had to be participating in the state subsidy program, which was the employment-related daycare subsidy, ERDC program. So you had to already be eligible for that and be getting the state subsidy. And this could be on top of it to sort of lower your overall childcare cost burden, and to hopefully allow you to attend a quality setting, which was really part of the goal. So in order to be able to make use of the subsidy, you had to be going to a family child care provider or a center that met a certain quality threshold, again, using these quality indicators. So the idea was that we would be helping to subsidize quality care, because we know that's one of the biggest issues, is that low-income folks might be able to find care, but it's often substandard care because they have to get the cheapest that they can. They have to make it be affordable for themselves. So it's cheap doesn't necessarily equate to quality. So that was kind of the idea behind that. So that's how the sort of affordability side rolled out. In the memo, there's a bunch of numbers, which I probably will not, I'm not going to go ahead and repeat now, about how many folks were served and how many centers made use of the quality initiative. But if you want specifics, I would say refer to that for numbers. And I'm happy to provide that to anyone in the audience if anybody's interested. So some of the challenges and successes of rolling this project out, as I noted before, there was a slow startup in the first 18 months, so that took time to get it rolling. We made some, because it was rolling out slowly, we made some modifications. Questions? I don't mean to roll on if there's questions. Oh, okay. Because it was rolling out slowly, we made modifications to try to allow more people to use, particularly the affordability piece. So we kind of lowered the eligibility requirements for a period of time, hoping to draw more people in to be able to make use of the subsidy program, primarily because we didn't want money to sit there and go unused when families could potentially use it. So that resulted in a very sharp spike in enrollment, also coinciding with, unfortunately, the recession hitting full smack, led to a very sharp spike in enrollment in the third year of the initiative, where in 1 month's time it went from undersubscribed to oversubscribed, essentially. So when we were notified how many folks had been brought in, that it was looking like if with that number of people on the affordability side, it was going to eat up the funds faster than the initiative was supposed to run for, which was through a whole other year now, right? The staff of Mount Hood Community College and our staff got together to try to, again, modify those requirements to lower them again so we would not oversubscribe or remain oversubscribed. And some people had to have benefits cut as a result of that. So as a result of kind of bringing the revenues or bringing the outlay more into line with what the money that was left, folks had the amount of subsidy decreased in some cases or lost their subsidy, or for people that were receiving $25 or less in subsidy were cut altogether, things like that. So there were impacts to that. Yeah, so I guess those were sort of the main things that happened in the way of challenges. And now, at the level that we're currently serving, we're spending about $700,000 a year total on the quality and affordability current budget. That budget is preserved to exist, so the initiative will exist for the next year, based on the level of enrollment that we currently have. So it should be able to finish out its services under its current contract. What this poses, however, given the presentation that you just heard, are issues for the future. As you can see from the original projections that we were given around revenues, we anticipated having some surplus of some level, we know how much, but some level to be able to continue to fund this initiative over time if it was successful. The other piece to keep in mind is the evaluator is going to come in the fall meeting and present. So we've had a professional evaluator looking at this project, and we'll come and talk to you about the success, the quality, and the affordability services. So that will give you some additional input, beyond just what staff has let you know about this project, for you to consider. But the issue is going to be there is not any surplus funds to continue this project. If the committee wants to continue the project, it will need to take funding from something that is currently already funded as well. There were no promises made to this project, particularly, although as Deborah clarified by asking me, there is no specific promise to renew anybody. Performance is always an issue that we always look at in terms of renewing, and no promised amounts were made to anyone else either. It's just simply what was done in the past, as most people who were performing their contracts had their contracts renewed for the remaining years of the levy last time around. So
I have one thing to add. However, if you remember our initial rounds, and probably you remember being on a committee, is that we took a lot of heat that we didn't pay a lot of attention to child care. And so part of the reason I think we did this is we wanted to help make up for underfunding child care programs in our initial rounds, if I remember correctly.
In the very first round, way back in 2003.
Yeah, and I'll just add, because I was on that side of the table, and I know you were very receptive to this at the time, and it wasn't really the fault of the committee here. It was the ballot language had talked about that child care was very important, and yet the ballot language also said this will be for proven and effective programs, and there wasn't a way to evaluate child care at the time. Head Start had evaluations, and so the Children's Levy funded Head Start. Peninsula Children's Center had independent evaluations, but very few centers, and certainly family-based childcare out there, had any kind of way to do evaluation. And so as a result of that, the Multnomah County Commission on Children got together in a partnership with Bobby Weber, who's nationally known as a child care researcher out of OSU, and said, we need to find some way to put this in place. And it was piloted here in Multnomah County as a result of that children's levy decision a long time ago. And since then, it has gone statewide using these 7 indicators, which are kind of hard and fast numbers that through the child care licensing division. And so now that we have that baseline, we were able to design something that affected the affordability. The idea was, how do you help low-income families access quality child care? So the ones that would score roughly, I think it's on the top half of those indicators, we would give affordability or subsidy grants to. But then we thought, we don't want to just help the good child care. What do we do about all the less than 50% child care, the lower quality child care? We also want to raise that. We don't want to just, provide more stability and revenue for the good child care and leave the poor child care behind, because a lot of the kids are still in that. And that's why some of the money went to the quality grants to try to raise the quality. So if it was lower level quality child care, they got quality grants. So actual things that would improve that child care services. If they were a higher level, they were helping low-income people access that. So it was a brilliant design, and every time it's come up, I'm like, are we making sure that we're saving some money aside for this program when it continues? And the hope had been, well, there's always some leftover money. Now we're at the point where there's not leftover money. In fact, we're looking how to cut it. And when I look at there's only, we have to cut $3 million of the existing grants. In my own mind, I'm trying to reserve judgment until we actually have an evaluation next fall about how this program has done. But certainly, conceptually, I hope this levy continues to put money in the arena of childcare for the very reasons from the very beginning. It was conceptualized as being really essential to help working families access quality childcare, and certainly even more so since the levy started. The Cradle to Career and Kitzhaber's education reforms is taking that more and more into account, how we have to help low-income families get into kindergarten ready to learn and not start at a deficit. So I'll be eager to hear that evaluation, and I think it's a great concept. And Ron, I know you've been very receptive from the beginning at supporting that concept as well.
And this evaluation is one that we are having done? Levy?
Yeah, it was part of the grant.
Okay.
So she should conclude. I think she's concluding her data collection this summer, and she should have her final report prepared by the fall. So we're anticipating having her come and present that to you.
So of the approximately $500,000 per year spent on the affordability piece of it, how much of that is direct grants to families or to the centers, and how much of it is it all going directly to?
Well, the staff to do it. I mean, that's the only thing that isn't. So someone has to assess the eligibility and, run the paperwork, write the checks, those sort of things.
Right. So do we have
I could get that for you, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
I would appreciate that. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll definitely be interested in knowing the different centers and where they're at, because of looking at a lot of communities of color that are low income. I know the statistics are even higher when they are not taught reading, et cetera, when they are younger. And so just looking at the centers that are looking at communities of color, I mean, I agree with what Alyssa says, because, I heard a statistic from a person in Washington that a person who is minority, low income, they are 10 times as likely than a student who is not to not know how to read, and how that is an indicator of just the whole social determinants of health as they grow older. Those gaps get wider. So I'm definitely interested in knowing the different, centers
so
that they're
just
helping.
To be clarified, so I can get the information for you. Do you want to know the centers that have received the quality improvement dollars, those, and also any center that is providing service to a child who's getting a subsidy?
I'm interested in, as you have it both categorized, the affordability and the quality. I'm truly interested in knowing of the not the nonprofits, but the centers that are falling below the indicators. Who are those centers? Those that are, not meeting that quality control as well. I'm interested in knowing of those centers that are already affordable, but are or not affordable, sorry, that are, getting the measures of those indicators. They are definitely in the quality control, but we're offering, making sure that those families can access this service is affordable. So I'm really interested in both, because as I look at, just communities of color, when the youth are not received the education, reading, et cetera, at an early age, and just looking at when they're in high school, et cetera, the fact that they're already falling behind. So, as far as what I'm requesting is really a list of both.
Okay. So I'll have to go back to the grantee probably for that, because we don't collect that level of detail. I have the demographics on the children who are being served, and I can get you that. But I don't have the centers and addresses. I don't have that off the top of my head for sure. So let me. I'm sure the grantee does, but I'll have to get it from them, and I can get that to you. I'll make a note.
So, why don't you, anything that we ask, provide to all of us.
Sure. And Deborah, you want sort of the portion that's direct grants versus admin. Is that what you want?
Right.
And the point that you made about making sure that that families collected what they were eligible for from ERDC before the children's levy chipped in was just because we wanted to make sure that we weren't subsidizing what the taxpayers of Portland were not subsidizing what's available there from the state. And just to, I think, affirm what you were saying is that presumably, given that this is based on research, that lower ratio, lower group size, higher compensation, lower turnover, all of those 7 indicators lead to higher outcomes for kids. I think your question is, given that assumption, how well is our outreach doing in really targeting populations that most need it, that to lead to school success? So I think just in general, geographic and demographic numbers of who's being served.
Okay. Well, demographics I could get you today. The others I'll need to be in contact with the grantee, and I can pass that on. Meg might know off the top of her head. I don't know, but I definitely don't. So I'll have to get you that.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions, we're going to move to our last agenda item, which is an update on the after-school intermediary proposal. You may recall at our last meeting in February, we gave conditional support for using $100,000 of leverage fund collaboration grant dollars toward coordinated training as well as professional development and quality improvement for this field. This field meaning people who work in the after-school environment.
Out-of-school time is what they call it.
Out-of-school time.
Because it includes summer and things besides just those specific after-school hours.
So Lisa will provide us the latest information on that venture, and we will then take a vote. Okay.
Before I move to that, I had one other update because I realized when I looked back at the minutes that Ron wanted to be updated on the Cradle to Career collaboration grant because I have gone ahead with the contract for that, and he wanted the specifics about that, so I wanted to just pass that on. So you all were in the know, and I guess Adrian, you weren't here. So we made a collaboration grant of $100,000 to Cradle to Career, and Ron giving me the ability to negotiate with them to get as they were in the process of raising their funding for the next year, and Ron wanted assurance that they were going to be able to raise enough of their proposed budget that they would be able to go forward with the project as we anticipated, so that our money wouldn't be sort of hanging out to dry out there. So that, in fact, has happened. They received our $100,000 is going to be over 2 years. They received a one-year $100,000 grant from the J.P. Morgan Chase Foundation here for next year's budget. So that has been confirmed and celebrated. They also have 2 other pending grants which are pretty much there but not cleared for announcing yet because other people are in control of when it can be announced, not the foundation, Portland Schools Foundation, for $335, also for next year. So their total budget for the first year of the project that our funding will be covering was around $600,000. And so they've raised now 89% of that pretty much as of June, or as of June 30, essentially those funds should come in. So that's, I felt confident enough, with those, figures that they were going to be able to, and they also do normal regular fundraising as part, so they'll be able to make up the rest of it with that if they didn't get further grants. Now for the third year of the grant, their fundraising is year by year. They don't have much on the books that's committed for the third year because most of the grants you get from corporate foundations and private foundations are 1-year grants. So I will have to continue to monitor it to make sure that it's going forward. But that's what we would do anyway with this type of grant. So that contract I've gone forward on that, and that's been made. So that's just really to update you on what was happening with that. So sorry I didn't put that specifically on the agenda, but I didn't realize it until after I read the minutes again to make sure that you guys wanted to hear another report on that. All right, so going back to the after-school intermediary project, to refresh those of you who were here, your memories, that was a project on, again, Alyssa was serving on the collaboration committee, so she's also familiar with this. You can chime in. This was a project that came about as the result, really, of funders getting together. So I was getting together with Multnomah County's Commission on Children and Families, Josh, sitting over there, the director, and also some of the staff from the County Human Service Department, who all of us talking, and also Campfire, who was working kind of under the auspices of a grant from the Gates Foundation around systems improvements in the out-of-school time field. And they were working on a number of different angles and had been hearing, in the connection with that work, been out amongst a lot of providers, hearing input really from them about what they might want or need. And one of the things that came up was around professional development and training and the lack of it in this field. And the other issue that came up, which we also heard when we went out into our community input before the last levy was passed, particularly from this group of people, was the lack of a feeling of a field and the lack of networking and connection opportunities for them, some of which professional development and training would also help bring people together, but also quality improvement efforts. I mean, the funders were interested in quality improvement efforts and how people might be brought together to do more quality improvement. So those were kind of the focus areas. And so this group, Campfire, and various representatives of the county and I worked together for about a year trying to put together a proposal to do what came out of that was to do an intermediary, have some kind of after school or out of school time intermediary organization that could provide that function of bringing this field together, could provide training and professional development at low or no cost, and could work on quality improvement there's all kinds of quality assessment tools and things you can use to try to improve your quality that not everybody is using. Some people are, some people don't, and it would be nice to be able to infuse that much more in the field. And this was something that people in the field expressed interest in. That was the other piece of it, after doing a provider survey. So we kind of crafted that into a proposal and brought it to the collaboration committee for consideration. And they voted to recommend that this committee spend $100,000 on that project. And so you all voted last time to do that with the condition that some other money come in on the board besides our money, because at that point, other money was not on the table, or to put it this way, haven't quantified it. The county was interested in participating, but hadn't quantified by how much. So since that time, since you all met in February, another game-changing thing has come into the picture, a pleasant one, and an unusual situation where the city of Portland, through the mayor's office, was invited to apply for a Wallace Foundation grant. Wallace Foundation is a big New York foundation. And they're working with the National League of Cities on this out-of-school time field building initiative. They've been doing this in other cities, so they've already sponsored 5 cities to do this type of a grant. Now they're wanting to do a second round where they're going to do another up to 10 cities to help them build systems to improve their quality. They have a variety of different focus areas you can use, but one of which is improving quality, including training and professional development, and also intermediary organizations or coordinating entities for the field in a city. So they invited the city of Portland to apply for this grant. There's only 15 cities that were invited to apply, and they will give up to 10 grants. So it was very good odds to apply to propose to do exactly the same things that we had already proposed to you that we would like to do. So it was an unusual situation that somebody comes along and invites you to apply for money on a project that you actually have already formed and are seeking funders for. So I worked with Josh to craft an application for the Wallace Foundation and the mayor's office to apply for these funds. And the total grant, you have to match it, come up with 25% match. But applying for $750 over 3 years for this project. So that was submitted at the end of May, and then there's a process that grant goes through where they do they announce finalists in June, and then finalists get a site visit over the summer, and then they do some more. thinking and maybe asking you for other information or other things. And then they do their very final announcement of awards in the last quarter of the year and projects to start in January. So at this juncture and at the time of the submission of the Wallace grant, what had been gathered locally, and so our idea was to put in $100,000 over 3 years. That was how it was kind of crafted to us. In addition to our $100,000, a little more than $177,000 in local in-kind and cash coming from different quarters were crafted into this application as match funds. And then, of course, in addition, if we were successful in getting the Wallace Foundation money, there would be hopefully, I mean, you never know if they're going to give you a full grant or if they give you a grant at all, but would be up to $750,000 in addition. So what staff is coming forward with is a recommendation in terms of our sort of conditional grant that you all granted in February would be to keep those dollars on the table in the hopes that they would be part of the persuasion of the Wallace Foundation to fund this project more fully, and that as soon as we have, I mean, I know that final awards are going to be announced in this last quarter of the year. That's what they've said in their RFP so far, but I would imagine if you're a finalist, you probably have a pretty darn good chance of getting the final money. So we may have sort of more of an indication later this month about whether we made the cut. So I would what I'm asking the committee to do is to vote to keep those funds there until we have an answer from the Wallace Foundation in hopes of drawing down quite a bit more money. So questions before?
Well, I have one more question. I'm completely in favor of it. The other question I think that Ron had brought up was around what happens if the commission in this whole process, the Commission on Children, and you at the time had said, well, there's a commitment to finding a good home for it. Eventually, Portland Schools Foundation might be that home when they build the capacity for it. I just wonder what the thinking has been since we last met on that.
At this point, I would say, and Josh, if you want to come up and speak too, I mean, my understanding from Josh is that the commission system is not under threat in the next year. So they are going to be kept in this for the first year of the next biennium. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then we don't know what happens after that.
Josh,
correct?
could you give us your name?
Sorry.
Yes. Joshua Todd, Director of the Multnomah County Commission on Children, Families, and Community. What Lisa said is correct. For the next fiscal year, we do have full funding for the local commission, so we are good through the end of June of 2012. Beyond that, obviously, there are questions about the entire commission system, but we have been in direct conversation with the Cradle to Career initiative. This effort will be applying to be, if there is an out-of-school time collaborative, this effort and all of its partners have said that it makes sense to apply, and we think that will provide kind of that long-term look at where does this get housed. I think there's several other places where if it doesn't, if the commission doesn't exist and isn't able to house this, we'd be able to find a home. We also have significantly crafted the way that we've put in our match so that the cash resources aren't dependent on commission dollars. We have put in about $15,000 of our commission dollars into it, but that's a small portion of the local match that's been achieved because of the concern of stability. If we know that we're going to have a full 3 years within the commission system, we would be able to significantly increase our cash investment, but we chose not to do that specifically so we wouldn't put the project at risk.
And Cradle to Career is receptive to this concept. It's just that they're not there in terms of their process yet. They have to choose what the kind of their, oh God, I'm going to say the names wrong now. Okay. It's priority strategies.
Strategic
priorities.
areas.
Oh, I knew I was going to get it wrong. Strategic priorities, they have to choose what those are, and then they have to figure out kind of what their little collaboratives are going to be around. And they're in the process of doing that. I think they will complete that by the fall, but they're not there yet, and they can't say that there will be a specific one called out of school time. Maybe it'll be something else or broader, or it'll have a subgroup that'll do that. And it's just a little bit unclear. But I think that ultimately, I think everyone would like to see that be the home because that would be the logical place.
And there's one other funding update that didn't go before you when I think the allocation committee originally looked at this. Multnomah County has been granted a small planning grant through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention called the Defending Childhood Initiative, and it's looking at the exposure of children to violence. They actually have been invited to reapply, which was, we did not know if they would be invited to reapply, for a $500,000 grant per year over 3 years. They have committed $30,000 over the 3-year project to include training for out-of-school providers on not only how do you identify young children who've been exposed to violence, but how do you make sure that after-school programming helps mitigate the impacts of exposure to violence. So there's $30,000 within their grant proposal, which they'll be moving forward on, that it goes directly to fund this project.
And that could in turn get $500,000 a year from
the Defending Childhood Initiative will be applying for $500,000, and then they've allocated $10,000 for the professional development training component of the intermediary.
Okay. Great. Well, we do want to take this as a vote, so we will take any public comment if anybody wishes to comment on this decision to keep the $100,000 for the out-of-school initiative on the table until we hear further from the I want to say Wallace Medical, the Wallace Foundation grant. Anybody wish to comment on that? Okay, I see nobody wishing to testify, so we will need a motion and a second to pursue this avenue or some other avenue.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Second, okay. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so it's unanimous. So we don't have another meeting until, we don't have another meeting scheduled yet, but it will be in the fall. And we will send out notices and reminders as well as post updated info on the Children's Levy website and to our database. So thanks again to the staff and to the allocation committee. And thank you all for being here today, to our public. And we will see you back here sometime in the fall when we stand adjourned.